Did y'all see this absolute diva in skinny jeans in Kansas City? Yesterday, this woman was caught on film allegedly trying to set fire to one of these giant warehouses that DHS and Stephen Miller are trying to purchase to turn into concentration camps, warehouses for human beings. Now, obviously, I'm not advocating for setting fire to buildings, but I think that there's a lot more to this story. According to KCTV5 News in Kansas City, about 6 p.m. on Thursday, February 12th, officers were called to the scene of a warehouse fire. Now, there wasn't significant damage. There were no people inside. Nobody was injured, and the fire was extinguished. Kansas City Fire Department does say it appears from their initial investigation that the fire was intentionally set. So apparently the suspect, looking like a millennial soccer mom in sandals and skinny jeans, out there bold as brass, left before investigators arrived at the scene. As of right now, when I'm recording this, nobody has been apprehended. Here's the thing. I don't advocate for violence. I also don't think that destruction of property equals violence. But also, I'm not advocating for people to go set fire to buildings or to vandalize property in any way. I understand that that has been considered a nonviolent tactic that is utilized in other resistance movements quite effectively. The thing is, it doesn't actually matter on an intellectual level what I consider violence or not violence, right? The state is violent toward human beings. The billionaires are violent toward the American people. DHS is brutalizing and breaking the bodies of Americans and our immigrant neighbors. That violence is happening on a daily basis. And these warehouses represent systemic violence. They represent Stephen Miller's god-awful Nazi fascist vision for this country, warehouses full of human beings. These warehouses are going to be run, if we allow them to open, they're going to be run by for-profit corporations, Geo Group and CoreCivic, who make billions and billions of dollars a year off of government contracts, off of our taxpayer dollars, to keep human beings in concentration camps. These are concrete, windowless boxes where there will be no oversight. Nobody will be able to see what's going on inside them. Look at the way the DHS is beating and brutalizing people on the streets in public where they are being filmed and documented. What do you think that they want to do behind closed doors, where there aren't going to be cameras, where there will not be accountability? What do you think they're going to do to people there? I mean, we already heard from Seamus, who's the Irishman who is in a concentration camp in El Paso, that the guards are beating immigrants and that people have been killed. And I've been very clear about this, and I'm not the only one saying it. When they run out of immigrants, who do you think that they want to put in these massive warehouses? Because Geo Group and CoreCivic, they need bodies so that they can charge the federal government a per diem. They're going to move on to political dissidents. They're going to move on to trans folks. They're going to move on. It's the first they came for poem, right? These warehouses, if Stephen Miller gets his way, hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million people will be kept in these facilities. They want to expand and have these all over the country. And I like to point out that destruction of property is not violence, even though in America we consider it violence, because in a capitalist system, the police, law enforcement, they protect property, not human lives. And we are now looking at a law enforcement agency that is entirely set up to commit an ethnic cleansing, to commit violence against human beings. That is the only purpose of DHS, to commit institutional violence against hundreds of thousands of people. And so while I don't think it's a good idea, I would never recommend that people set fire to buildings. The amount of pearl clutching I'm seeing from conservatives this morning over this, the way that they are really freaking the fuck out over no human lives being harmed at all because a piece of property was set on fire, and they're not outraged at hundreds of thousands of immigrants. They're not outraged at Alex Preddy and Renee Good being murdered, Keith Porter being murdered. How many Americans have been shot by ICE over the last year? Miramar Martinez was shot 5 times, and the Customs and Border Patrol agent bragged about it afterward. That's real violence. That's real violence. And I think it's important that we not put those on the same plane. We don't put setting an empty building on fire as being the same level as shooting Americans, as lawless, violent, paramilitary shooting Americans in the street because they can't control their feelings. That's not even remotely the same thing. There's new reporting out today from the Washington Post, and I'm sorry to have to cite them after Jeff Bezos fired 1/3 of their journalists, and he's just all the way up Donald Trump's beehole, right? The Washington Post is reporting today that Donald Trump and Stephen Miller want to spend $38 billion taxpayer dollars buying these giant warehouses and converting them into concrete concentration camps, warehouses for human beings. $38 billion. They could end the housing crisis with that money. $38 billion could fund an awful lot of healthcare. $38 billion of our taxpayer dollars could fund good services, infrastructure funding for us, the American people. And Stephen Miller and Donald Trump are spending it on concentration camps. Now, thankfully, what they're doing is deeply unpopular. It's pissing off not only progressive folks, not only immigrants' rights folks, it's pissing off everybody in very red parts of the country, which is where they're trying to put these facilities. It's pissing off independents and Republicans alike. There's no way that you can sugarcoat. There's no way that you can pitch concrete warehouses full of human beings and have people perceive it as anything other than concentration camps. Stephen Miller wants hundreds of thousands of people to be kept in concrete boxes and to charge the American taxpayer tens of billions of dollars a year for it. Nobody in this country, not a single person, voted for rat fuck weasel Stephen Miller. Nobody. But yet he is spending tens of billions of dollars of our taxpayer money in order to live out his Nazi dream of warehouses of human beings. These will very quickly become forced labor camps. They will very quickly become death camps. Let's not elude ourselves at all about the reality of what Stephen Miller wants. He wants to replicate the Third Reich in this country against immigrants, against anybody who isn't whatever he deems to be acceptable. Again, fucking wild from the descendant of persecuted Russian Jews. Stephen Miller's cousin has spoken out repeatedly about how ashamed she is of him and what a monster he is, by the way. Well, luckily, these horrible, awful plans are not ones that are vibing with the American people, and it's creating that backlash, that huge backlash. And yes, it will result in independent, isolated cases of people who act out of their frustration against the tremendous injustice that is happening, like this person here in Kansas City. But the effective civil resistance is how we are going to stop these warehouses. We have to figure out what land use policies, what ordinances are in place, and we have to use the levers of local, county, state government in order to stop this, in order to stop these warehouses from being sold and being permitted to be used as literal fucking concentration camps. And we are seeing people on a local level all over the place, including in Kansas City, pushing back as hard as they possibly can through city councils, through their land use offices, pressuring not only local officials, but also the owners of these properties not to do this. Do not fucking do this. I will always say our greatest amount of power can be exerted on a hyper-local level. That is where we can do the most good and push back most effectively against the cruel, awful plans of this authoritarian regime. And we did hear yesterday that thanks to folks in Kansas City organizing and vigorously pushing back against this sale, the owners of the property, Platform Ventures, have been pressured sufficiently that they have decided to back out of this warehouse sale. That is not happening because Platform Ventures suddenly grew a conscience. These overbuilt warehouses all around the country are owned by mega corporations and billionaires, and they only care about profit. They only care about their bottom line. It is because of regular, ordinary people mobilizing massive pressure campaigns against these corporations and also toward their city government, pushing their elected officials to take action. That is why this company, Platform Ventures, has decided not to sell. It's because of grassroots resistance. It's because of the voices of ordinary people being absolutely outraged and doing everything they can, saying, we will make your lives miserable. We will use every lever of government to make it as difficult as possible for these concentration camps to come into our communities. Nobody wants a concentration camp in their community. If you ask your average American, no matter where they fall in the political spectrum, to look at Stephen Miller's plan for what he wants to do, nobody wants that for the future of this country. And these giant warehouses are a physical example of how truly terrible his eugenicist, fascist, Nazi vision is for this country. Americans are not on board with it. It is mass mobilized pushback of the American people on a local level that will stop Stephen Miller and the fascist GOP. Platform Ventures was already pulling out of this sale before this woman set this building on fire. That was entirely because of local electeds and local people pushing back and refusing to accept this as the future of their community. And we all have to refuse to accept this as the future of this nation, and we have to continue to be vigilant because Stephen Miller's going to keep trying, and we have to keep defending. We got to be vigilant now.